Hello. Hi, Chicken Dog 13. You are the first person who joined us today at Wham Live. Good for you, and thank you. Thank you so much for being the first person. Geriatric Neuropsychology, thank you for joining in. Rachel Elizabeth Beth, thank you for joining. Sullivan Kenny CY, Wave. K.A. Fond AW, Wave, thank you so much. Double Project, I guess. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so happy to see Jardin des Séances. Thank you so much. Be Brain Powerful, nice to see you. Thank you so much. Michelle Nibi, thank you for joining. Hi from San Francisco. Hi, how are you? I hope you're staying safe and healthy up there in San Francisco. I love San Francisco. Visited there many times when I was First Lady of California, and always love visiting there. So thank you for joining. Today on Wham Live, we're super excited to be joined by a great friend of the women's Alzheimer's movement and the author of this new book. Maybe I'm not, showing it properly. It's called The Genius Life. It's got a genius cover too. The Genius Life, Heal Your Mind, Strengthen Your Body, and Become Extraordinary. I mean, like, who doesn't want to do that? Who doesn't want to heal their mind, strengthen their body, and become extraordinary? I mean, hello. So we are so lucky to be joined today by Max. He also is the author of a New York Times best-selling book called Genius Foods. And but we met many years ago. He's going to be on in a minute, but I just want to kind of talk about who he is and why we're talking to him. I met him several years ago because he got interested in this space and in Alzheimer's because his mom was diagnosed with dementia at a very young age, at like 58. And instead of just sitting back and accepting, he went on this long quest to understand the disease as best he could, to change his eating habits, and to help his mom as much as possible. And he really went after it like a reporter, like a journalism student, and like a devoted son. And so I really love him, and I admire him, I respect him, and I always love talking to him. And I just really like what he's doing with his life. He's got a great podcast. He has a big Instagram following. He's super cool, super attractive, super young, super smart. And he's living an extraordinary life. And so he's going to come on here today to talk about how to be extraordinary. You know, it's kind of like what I want to talk about. It's really, this time in our world is calling on all of us. Oh, there you are, Max.
There I am.
There you are.
I've been decapitated by the device. Let me try to angle this up a little bit.
Oh, yeah, so everybody can see you. There you are.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? With your big smile there. You're
It's
extraordinary.
it's so good to see you.
It's so good to see you. That's better.
What's going on?
Oh, nothing. It's just quiet. Not much. I mean, hello. Gosh, we are living in extraordinary times, right?
Extraordinary times.
We are living in extraordinary times. So why not talk to someone who can help us learn how to live out our extraordinary lives, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Every human being, I think, should have the same opportunity to live what I call a genius life.
Yeah.
And what that means is really, feeling fully expressed, being healthy, being free of disability. And, we live in an incredible time. We live like in the most amazing time that there's ever been, but there's still this uneven distribution of resources and of opportunity. And I'm very grateful for activists like you that are on the ground, really, talking about all issues from all sides. Yeah. My wheelhouse, the topic that I've become very passionate about is health. And so I do what I can to try to inform people to make better, healthier choices in their lives, regardless of where they fall on the socioeconomic spectrum.
So let's talk about that. I was talking a little bit before you came on about how we met, how we have been, I think, advocates, activists, whatever the word is, architects of change in the same lane for many years. And we both came to it as really children of dementia, children of Alzheimer's. You through your mom, myself through my dad in 2003. And we've both kind of done our work and we work together, which is what I'm so happy about. And you really are talking about genius foods. You talk about access to food. So let's start there because we're talking so much at this moment in our history about discrepancies, disparities in healthcare, in access to food. And when we talk about Alzheimer's, we always talk at the Women's Alzheimer's Movement about how Alzheimer's discriminates against women, and in particular women of color. And nobody seems to know why that is. And you talk about also lack of being able to access food, particularly also to people of color. So if you're out there right now and you're like, I can't access the food that Max is telling me to eat, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to do the best with what you've got. And I think that the food distribution issue is a major problem. It's a real problem. The fact that there are food deserts now.
Yeah.
I was doing some research earlier because it's not really a topic that I've covered in great detail on my own show, on my own podcast, The Genius Life. And I realized that in my own city in Los Angeles, there are literal food deserts.
Yeah.
Which is super strange. I mean, I take for granted the fact that in my neighborhood, I have access to, within a 1 mile radius, there's probably at least a dozen supermarkets and healthy supermarkets.
Yeah.
So, I like to remind people that there's the internet. We have like a postal system. You can now get online and you can order incredibly healthy foods.
Yeah.
I mean, even Amazon now has become, I have no affiliation with that company.
Right.
But you can get healthy food on Amazon. You can get healthy foods. You can get healthy produce and meat delivered to your doorstep. And what I think it really takes is just a little bit of education and a little bit of knowledge.
Yeah.
And that being said,
go ahead.
yeah, that being said, I mean, you can go to your local supermarket and make little tweaks that are that are going to be more cost effective for you. So I like to talk about the fact that frozen produce is a great option for people. It's often going to be less expensive than fresh produce.
Okay.
You can buy, I think like foods like eggs, are an incredibly nutrient dense food, no matter what type of egg we're talking about. They're nature's multivitamin in a way. So, all these little tweaks I think are super important. Reducing spending on foods you don't need, on brand name products. Mm-hmm. Ultra processed foods, sodas, sugar sweetened beverages, those are all going to go a long way towards leveling the playing field for people.
And
again,
you also
regardless.
talk about how they go a long way towards your brain health, right? So at the Women's Alzheimer's Movement and in partnership with you, we talk a lot about, short of having a cure for Alzheimer's, we talk about what can we do today? And if you have a parent who's struggling with cognitive impairment, what can they do today? So we talk a lot about what do you eat? How do you move? Do you sleep? Are you socially isolated or socially connected? Are you still learning? Are you still growing your greatest asset, right? So if someone's out there and listening to you right now, here today, and they find themselves in either one of those places, they might be 50 or 60, worried about cognitive impairment, or they may have a parent that they're worried about. You've been down this road. What are 3 things you would say?
Oh man, such a good question. Well, I would say from the nutritional angle, try not to overcomplicate things. As best as you can, try to avoid what are called ultra processed foods. These foods are what I like to call hyper palatable foods. They become impossible to moderate our consumption of those foods. And they're very easy to identify. Usually they're in the aisles of the supermarkets. They come with a laundry list of ingredients, half of which you can't pronounce. And those foods are basically designed by food manufacturers to be addictive. It's the reason why when you open up the bag of chips intending only to have a handful, you end up eating the whole bag, or the same, applies to a pint of ice cream. So avoid those, avoid empty calories, avoid added sugar. Your average person today consumes 66 pounds of added sugar per person per year. And the same holds true for added fats and oils. So I'm not actually, although I advocate for a low carb or a lower carb diet, I'm not one of these low carb zealots who recommends pouring oils on things. Like, there's empty calories in terms of sugar, and there's also empty calories in terms of fats and oil.
Right.
Um, the second thing that I would say in terms of brain health is exercise. You literally can't get around the fact that exercise is medicine for the brain.
Yeah, so
Um,
let's pause a second because that's one of the first things I always heard you talking about, like building up, in your brain of the BDNRF, right? Is that
yeah,
what, yeah. And that really you can grow your brain, make it come alive by moving your body.
yes, absolutely. I have a friend who likes to say that when the body moves, the brain grooves. It's such a good saying, and
Oh,
it's
I
so
love that.
true.
Like
Yeah,
repeat that. When the body moves, the
the,
brain grooves.
yeah, it's so true. It's a tonic for mental health.
Yeah.
Um, it's a tonic for it boosts what's called executive function. So I like to talk about living a genius life, right? To me,
Right.
you don't have to be Einstein to be genius. You could be more genius doing the laundry. You could be more genius when it comes to showing up for your friends and loved ones. And exercise,
How do you do that? How do you define that?
well, just being
Yeah.
more present, being less distracted, maybe being less anxious, being less depressed. These are all the things that await you on the other side of exercise, really. It's an incredible thing. I'm one person when I walk into the gym, and I'm a completely different person when I walk out of it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's
and
what we know, kind of to Max's point, what we do know about prevention, or when we talk about prevention, when we talk about brain health, we talk about exercise, right? When your body moves, your brain grooves. We talk about the foods, as Max was just talking. We talk about sleep, because that's when your brain can, as they say, get rid of the trash and regenerate, right?
absolutely. Sleep is super important. We now know that when we sleep, a system in the brain called the glymphatic system becomes active. And it basically flushes away proteins that would otherwise have the chance to aggregate and clump and form the plaques that we associate with Alzheimer's disease. To the degree that on one night of poor sleep, there's an increase in cerebrospinal fluid of amyloid beta, which is the backbone of
Yeah.
amyloid plaque, and tau protein, which becomes misfolded and again is associated with Alzheimer's
So,
disease.
Max, so many women in particular, and struggle with sleep. Women in their 50s or 60s are like, "That's great. Tell me to sleep. I can't sleep." Whether I'm perimenopausal, menopausal, my sleep cycle is off, and I have to either go and take Ambien or something else, but I can't sleep.
Yeah, so there are a few things that I would recommend. So first of all, diet is related to sleep. So eating a diet that minimizes inflammation, I think, is important. But beyond that, we have to build up something over the course of the day that sleep scientists refer to as sleep pressure. And one of the best way sleep pressure, yeah, it's the pressure. It's basically the pressure to get to sleep, so that by the
Ah,
time you, yeah, so that by the time you lay your head down on the pillow at night, your brain is like, oh, I need this. But if we're sedentary all day and we're
right.
over consuming energy, we're eating lots and lots of, refined carbohydrates and added oils and processed foods and things like that. But by the time we get into our beds at night, there's no sleep pressure. And so it's just, it makes insomnia all the more likely.
Yeah.
Another tip that I would offer people, because we all struggle with endless amounts of distraction. We live in the era of these streaming devices where
Yeah.
there's always a new show to stream. When you feel tired at night, you really should actually get to bed rather than pushing through it to finish the show or movie or whatever it is that you're watching. Because what happens is if you get really tired and you decide not to go to bed, then that can lead to an increase in a hormone called cortisol, which is
Yeah.
actually like nature's caffeine in your brain. So when you feel tired at night, make sure that you actually go to sleep.
What's got you most excited, or what has piqued your interest the most in this field, let's just say in the last year? Because as I said, you and I have been working in this space. I think both of us had hoped, researchers or scientists would have a cure by now. I'm much older than you. And I remember back in 2004, 5, 6, 7, everybody said to me, the cure is in some vial in a lab right around the corner. And I told that to people, oh, the cure is around the corner. And here we are, 2020, hard to get people to talk about Alzheimer's, hard to get the funding up at the level of other diseases. There's a lot of ageism out there. There's obviously sexism, racism, all of that. but there's a lot of stigma to this disease. And people say to me a lot, like, aren't you like hopeless?
Yeah, what excites me is the fact that we now can talk about the prevention of these kinds of conditions
Mhm.
and not get, tomatoes thrown at us or, risk getting called a quack or a charlatan, because now for the first time, I think over the past couple of years, certainly the research is coming out by the day showing us that our choices matter when it comes to our brain health. In fact, I
Yeah.
believe it was 2018 or 2019 that the Alzheimer's Association, for the first time, acknowledged that you can take risk mitigation steps
Yeah.
in your life. That's an amazing thing. When I first started, educating myself and campaigning for this to younger people, nobody was talking about prevention.
Yeah.
Nobody was talking about prevention, and in
Yeah.
fact, I was told to kind of be careful and to like temper my words.
I
And
got
now,
that same thing. Also, nobody was talking, like when I would say, I think there are more women, they're like, no, it's just because women live longer. Nothing there. So I think that's always a good thing. I always use both those stories as examples to follow your gut, because very often doctors have this gap of knowledge, right? Because they don't have the research maybe that they need to make um, assessments about where we actually are.
absolutely, yeah. And I say this with all due respect to the medical profession and
Yeah.
doctors in general. The vast majority of doctors, I mean, most doctors are not experts in nutrition at all.
Or
Like they're not.
Alzheimer's or cognitive
Or
health, right?
or Alzheimer's or cognitive health or even women's health.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I think that there is a certain amount of like self-empowerment that needs to be done to inform yourself, to arm yourself with knowledge.
Let me ask you
Um,
here. Kitten Smith said, is sugar the number one thing we should avoid?
uh, I would say that sugar is definitely up there. Yeah, I would say that sugar is definitely up there.
Sugar is up
It's
there with a sedentary lifestyle, right?
Yes, yeah. And I would also add to that unhealthy oils, unhealthy fats. You want to
Example.
make sure that you're eating healthy fats, not the unhealthy fats. And the unhealthy fats, I would put oils like canola oil, corn oil, soybean oil. I would put those in that category. So you want to avoid those unhealthy fats.
Okay.
And instead, make sure that the primary fat that you're using in your kitchen is extra virgin olive oil, or close second would be avocado oil. Those are the two I would say like healthiest, brain healthiest fats with a solid evidence-based grounding.
Okay.
Um,
There's another
yeah,
question here, Max. Is there a connection between the brain and the gut? I like that question because everybody says the gut is the brain, the second brain,
yeah,
the first brain.
yeah. Second brain. I mean, we have what's called the enteric nervous system, so the gut is definitely connected to the way that we, feel and think. And I would say the most important thing to know about the gut is that the gut is where the majority of the immune system in your body is poised to focus on, because it's the largest interface that we actually have with the environment. Anything that you swallow can potentially pose a risk to the entirety of your system, not least of which your brain.
Right.
So your gut has a major ability to modulate what's called inflammation
Right.
in your body. So by eating a healthy diet, that can actually help your brain. Whereas eating an unhealthy diet that is saturated with these unhealthy oils, ultra processed foods, refined grain products and flours and things like that, that's where your gut can actually contribute to inflammation in the body and the brain, of course.
Max, there's another question here. What's a good vegan substitute for butter, from Kenda's article? Can't.
Yeah, a good vegan substitute for butter. Well, I guess it depends on what you're using it for, but I actually find, if you're looking, for example, for something to put on, uh, a piece of bread. We'll just use that as an example. I don't personally eat a lot of bread, but I think that if you use extra virgin olive oil and you throw some salt in it, it's just as good, if not better. So it's
Well,
it's fantastic. Yeah.
on your
Now,
bread.
yeah, I mean, extra. That's how the Europeans do it, and the Mediterranean diet is associated with a dramatic risk reduction for Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease. If you're talking about cooking, butter for cooking, then I would use avocado oil, which is very stable at high heats,
Okay,
like
so
butter.
a lot of you are asking different questions, which is really great. But I just want to remind you that a lot of these questions are answered in Max's newest book. It's called The Genius Life. I just want to come back to it. He also has a book called Genius Foods, where I know he's answered some of these questions. I always think it's good to ask again because I've had numerous conversations with him about the same subject and I forget and then I remember it again. So I think, what kind of salt do you recommend? Iodine is obviously important. Um,
Yeah, salt. I use like a pink salt, like a Himalayan pink salt. There's a salt that I get from Utah. It's a company called Redmond Real Salt. I have no affiliation with them, but I really, really enjoy it. I'm a huge fan of salt, actually. I think it's really important to make vegetables taste good. I'm all about seasoning. A lot of the salt that people tend to be worried about having too much salt in their diet.
yeah,
But if you look on the backs of canned foods and processed foods, you'll see tremendous amounts of sodium. But the amount of salt that you actually add to your food is
yeah.
negligible in the grand scheme of things if you're eating a predominantly whole foods diet.
Sinar B here said, I'm a sugar addict. Help, help. What can I do? And I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah, I love sugar too. I mean, I think that now we live in an amazing time where they have these sweet treat products that are
Yeah.
sugar free.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of stevia. I use monk fruit. I use erythritol, which is like a sugar alcohol.
Yeah.
So these kinds of foods, they give us the same feeling of reward, but they don't have any calories. They don't have any sugar, so they could be great. They even now have diet sodas that are sweetened with stevia.
Yeah.
So.
In this book here, I wanted to ask you, Max, why did you did Genius Foods that did really well. What did you want to cover with this book that you didn't cover in Genius Foods?
I'm so glad you asked that, Maria. Nutrition is one part of the story, but it's not the only part. So I basically filled the Genius Life with all of the things that I left out of Genius Foods about what it means to live a long time and to be free of age-related chronic disease. So, I mean, I talk about our relationship with light, how important light is from the standpoint of our brains. I do a thorough dive into exercise, as we talked about. So if you want a really efficient and effective way of boosting your brain health with activity, I offer that in the Genius Life. I talk about the everyday toxic chemicals that are probably hiding out in your kitchen cupboards right now that you need to be mindful of in that book. And I detail some of them, where to find them, how to, detox. I don't really like the term detox so much because it's sort of been co-opted by the supplement industry, but, our bodies have powerful detoxification organs. So I talk about how to basically support your body's own detoxification. So it's all of the different lifestyle aspects that it takes to have a brain that works as well as it ought to, so that you can be less depressed, less anxious. I talk about, all the little hacks that you can do in your day-to-day life that are going to have big health wins.
And you also talk about purpose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I talk a lot about purpose, but I think, and my kids are always saying to me, why do you work like you do? Why do you do what you do? Why don't you stop? And I try to always explain that I think if you have a vision and a mission and a purpose, it's a way to get up in the morning. It's a way to, what you're trying to, that mountaintop that you're trying to get to, and it fuels you. It has nothing to do with, money or fame or anything. It's like, I want to find a cure for that. I want to prevent that from happening. What do I need to do to get that done?
Purpose is so important. In fact, Dan Buttner, who's the guy who's a National Geographic journalist who
He's a
basically
great friend of ours. He did
is
a
he?
Lamb Live. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, he talks about the fact that in the world's blue zones, which for listeners who are unfamiliar, these are parts of the world where people will live an exceptionally long time. They all have a sense of purpose.
Right.
And, for example, my sense of purpose, I didn't even realize until my mom got sick. And I realized that my purpose was to learn about nutrition and about science and about exercise and sleep and all this stuff and make it accessible and approachable and achievable for the average person. And that's really what my purpose has become. And because I live that purpose, I'm excited every day to get out of bed and to do what it is that I do, from posting on social media to doing my podcast. It's a really important part of the equation. And purpose looks like something different for every person.
That's right, which is so great. And oftentimes purpose is in your own home, right? People often go out looking, I got to find my purpose. I got to find, and your purpose came through your mother,
Hmm.
actually. And in many ways, my purpose came from watching something happen to my father. My purpose came from being an only girl in a family of a lot of testosterone and men, right? It's so these things, kind of drive us, and they're really very often right in front of you.
Yeah, very well said. I mean, my mom inspired all my work, and she passed away about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And she lived a life of purpose, and she became very handicapped by the disease in its later stages, um, and it just really drove home the point, that point to me, that is, you really have to uh, live every day like
Yeah.
it's your last, because time is guaranteed to nobody. I could be walking out on the street and a jet fuselage could fall on my head. We just don't know. My
Yeah.
mom was young and she was seemingly healthy, and she was really struck down in a profound way by this condition. And it's not something that I would wish on anybody. But if you do what you can, if you make it if you make it your purpose to discover your purpose, then that's gonna be a great thing in your life, and it's gonna pay dividends up until the end.
I'm, obviously I met you when your mom was still alive, and I, um, I know that you were kind of set out on this path with the hope of helping her, and I think you did help her so much, and I think you helped so many other mothers in your path, which is, I think, a really. I just want you to know that it's important that you know that, and it's important you know that what you set out to do has been accomplished. That doesn't mean it's over, right? That doesn't mean you're at the end of it, but what you set out to do, you did. And that's really important, I think, to know. You want to know that your mom was proud of you.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, my mom was also very proud of the fact that you and I were friends.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, she
well,
loved
I'm
the
a
fact that.
surrogate mother to you. That I'll be your surrogate mom. I have all these surrogate children, but Max is much younger, and I think it's so important, Max, because you are so much younger than me. Do you find young people your age interested in brain health? Because nobody, when I was your age, nobody talked about brain health.
Yeah, very very few people. I mean, I'll let you in on a little secret.
Okay.
If you look at my Instagram, I actually very rarely talk about brain health and dementia, because I know that, the people that follow me are not necessarily into that topic. So I
Yeah.
use, the things that people are into as a Trojan horse to get to talk about the ways that you can reduce inflammation, you can reduce your toxic burden, you can, maybe improve your body composition with exercise, knowing full well in the back of my head that all of the recommendations that I make on my social media feed are going to help you in terms of your brain health, in terms of your mental health. So I use it as a Trojan horse because generally young people are not super concerned about their long-term brain health. Um, it's not enough necessarily to say that the same things that you do for your long-term brain health are going to help you think better and remember better and focus better in the here and now. Um, and of course, also we know now that dementia often begins in the brain decades before the
Yeah.
first symptom. So if you look at my Instagram feed, it's all posts about how to just more generally be healthier, and to make little tweaks in your day-to-day life. But I rarely speak on social media in the language of dementia prevention, because I just know that it's going to be a turnoff for young people, which is sad, which
Yeah,
is
but you
sad.
can you can talk about brain health. You can talk
Yeah.
about prevention, deterioration of your brain, because that's part of the big challenge, right, for all of us in this space. Also, is nobody kind of really wants to talk about it because nobody really kind of wants to talk about it. So there's this huge looming stigma, not only about ageism, but about Alzheimer's, about dementia, about this kind of vision of, uh-oh, I'm losing my brain, right? So nobody wants to talk about it, and people will only think about it when they're 90.
Yeah, and then these are major problems because, as I mentioned, dementia begins in the brain way earlier than the presentation of symptoms. It's not a genetic condition, really. I mean, we have genetic risk factors,
Yeah. Yeah.
but ultimately anybody can develop dementia. And what we know now is that the health of the brain is intricately tied to the health of the body. And
Yeah.
so if you can get your body in a healthier state via whichever means necessary, I tend to advocate for a lower carb diet. That's sort of my bias, because I just think that It's the most satiating of the diets, but really whatever it takes for you to maybe shrink the belly, if you've got a little extra weight, or to boost your fitness. I mean, those all are going to weigh so strongly in terms of your brain health. Um, and the best time to start with all of this is now.
Yeah, and now. So right now, I'm going to let people go right now and buy your book. It's called The Genius Life. Once again, heal your mind, strengthen your body, and become extraordinary. And I'm a big believer that we're all here to be extraordinary. That's our divine right. That's our divine purpose. And that is the path that is chartered for us. But we've got to chart it ourselves, actually. It's a decision that each of us have to make, whether we want to pursue a life of excellence, whether we want to be extraordinary, whether we want to live a purpose-filled life. And so if you care about your brain and your body, or you love somebody who you're concerned about, get Max's book, get Genius Foods, Genius Life, and do what you can to heal your mind and life, and follow him on his podcast, on Instagram, get to know him. I'm always trying to set him up. I'm always trying to but
That
anyway, Max, I want to
I
thank
love
you
it.
so much for all the work you've done, for your extraordinary support, friendship, loyalty, and belief. So, and good luck with this book. I know it's hard to put out a book. My daughter brought out a book in the beginning of March. It's tough to put out a book during COVID, during a pandemic and an uprising. It's tough to get attention. So you always have a home with us at the Women's Alzheimer's Movement.
Thank you, Maria. You're the best. I love you, and
Love
I look forward to the next time that we get to hang in person.
Yes, amen. Okay, thanks, Max. Take care.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.
Okay, everybody, that was Max Lugavere, The Genius Life. It's a beautiful book. It's a pretty book. And I always like to look at books when they don't have their cover on, and it's pretty like that too. So I hope you'll check out his work. He's an extraordinary young man, very committed, very passionate, and purpose driven. So he's a good guy, and his mom would be super proud of him. Thank you so much for joining us on Wham Live. Please, if you're not subscribed to the Wham Weekly, that's our weekly newsletter where we bring you everything you need to know about women, Alzheimer's, brain health. We have doctors. You can ask questions. I hope you'll subscribe to that. It's free. It comes out on Tuesdays. It's called the Wham Weekly. We're here on Thursdays, Wham Live. You can join us on Facebook. You can join us through newsletters, live things. Oh my goodness, we're everywhere. So thank you so much for joining us today. We wish you a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay purpose driven. Okay.